Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that may otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Fair use is in full effect. This is for educational purposes only. Ezekiel 38:4, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be a guard unto them. We got new news from the Hudson Times. Russia is cutting ties with any kind of agreement that they had in the past with the European nations. We're getting closer and closer. Closer and closer to Revelation 11 and 14. The second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. You got action in what is so-called Europe, which is nothing but Asia. You got action in Western Asia, which they call in the Middle East. And now you got action in the Caribbean. Russia will be a guard to all the nations that are enemies to NATO and the U.S. Now let's check this out. For entertainment, for educational purposes only.
Russia has officially withdrawn from several post-Cold War military cooperation agreements with European nations, marking a major shift in its defense and diplomatic policy as the war in Ukraine continues to rage. The Russian government announced that it would formally terminate all bilateral military cooperation arrangements with European countries, signaling a complete break from the security frameworks that once aimed to maintain stability across the continent. Moscow officially granted permission to the Defense Ministry on December 20th to withdraw from the long-standing military pacts, a move that underscores its growing disengagement from post-Cold War security arrangements with Europe. The decision was formally enacted through an official government order, which was published on Russia's state legal information portal, giving the announcement full legal and administrative backing. These agreements were originally concluded between the years 1992 and 2002, a decade that marked efforts to rebuild trust and cooperation between Russia and its European counterparts after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. According to reports, several European nations are expected to be directly affected by Russia's decision to withdraw from the military cooperation pacts. These include major countries such as Germany and Poland, as well as northern European states like Norway and Denmark. In Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia also feature on the list, along with Western allies including the United Kingdom, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The Czech Republic is among the affected nations as well, highlighting the broad scope of this policy shift across both Central and Western Europe. The move comes at a critical moment, as the war in Ukraine nears the end of its fourth year with no visible progress toward peace or de-escalation on the battlefield. The prolonged conflict continues to strain international relations, deepen divisions, and reshape the geopolitical landscape of Europe. It also coincides with a renewed wave of diplomatic efforts, including a US-backed initiative that proposes long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. This plan aims to strengthen Kiev's defenses, reassure its allies, and potentially lay the groundwork for a broader, more...
See, America trying to distance itself from NATO because it got too much action going on in other places around the world, mainly the Caribbean right now. And they still got to cover up what them Israelis doing, right?
Stable security framework in the region. Russia's relations with European nations have sharply deteriorated since it launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, marking a dramatic turning point in its modern diplomatic and military history. The conflict has eroded decades of careful engagement between Moscow and the West, leaving trust and cooperation at their lowest levels since the Cold War. The ongoing war has effectively shattered the foundations of post-Cold War security cooperation that once connected Moscow with the European Union. What began as a framework of dialogue and mutual restraint has now given way to deep suspicion and military confrontation across the continent. In 2023, Russia took another decisive step by formally withdrawing from the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, a landmark agreement that had served as a cornerstone of European stability for decades. The move symbolized Russia's break from the cooperative security architecture that helped prevent large-scale military buildups after the fall of the Soviet Union. That treaty had placed strict limits on major categories of conventional military hardware, including tanks, artillery, and combat aircraft, ensuring that no single country could amass overwhelming force. Its dissolution removed one of the final checks on military escalation in Europe, further intensifying concerns about regional security and balance of power. Moscow has placed the blame squarely on NATO's continued expansion and the policies of the United States, accusing them of systematically undermining the foundations of European security. Russian officials argue that by extending NATO's reach eastward, Western powers have created an environment of distrust and confrontation that leaves little room for constructive dialogue. In response, European governments and NATO allies have strongly condemned Russia's withdrawal from the military agreements, viewing it as a deeply destabilizing move for the entire region. Leaders across Europe warn that the decision erodes decades of arms control progress and raises the risk of renewed military tension along the continent's eastern borders.
Let's get one more. The UK want war.
Don't buy the old one, or the new one, or even the newest one, because they just came out with a brand new adapter that not only does the same thing that...
And so this guy's up there doing what he's told to do, and what he's done his whole career is lie to his own country, his own citizens, about the threat. And so he's there to gin up support for a war that's going to enrich a handful of billionaires and slaughter a bunch of other people, and drain your and by the way, drain your tax base, your treasury, to gear up for it. That's what this is all about. Scare people so you will get more money into the pockets of the international security state, the war machine. UK is warning their citizens to get ready for a war with Russia. That's happening. You want to hear it? Here we go.
Sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a part to play, and more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means.
British families must be ready to send their sons and daughters to defend the nation, the head of the UK military has warned. Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, Chief of the Defence Staff, said more people need to be prepared to take up arms. While a direct Russian attack on UK soil does remain unlikely, he stressed that the risk is not zero. Speaking at a Royal United Services Institute event in Westminster, Sir Richard urged schools and universities to encourage careers in defence and the arms industry. He warned that civilians will need to play a part in building national resilience to keep the country functioning in a crisis.
Today, the UK is subject to an onslaught of cyber attacks from Russia. And we know that Russian agents are seeking to conduct sabotage and have killed on our shores. But Russia's hard power is growing quickly. The Russian armed forces are now more than 1.1 million strong, consuming more than 7% of GDP and around 40% of government spending, which is a sum that has more than doubled over the past decade. While I've argued that Russia's campaign in Ukraine has so far been a strategic failure, with NATO bigger, more united, stronger, and spending increased amounts on rearmament, we should be under no illusions that Russia has a massive, increasingly technically sophisticated, and now highly combat experienced military. But it's absolutely clear that Russia's hard power is something to fear. But what about Russia's intent to use it? The war in Ukraine and Russia's track record shows Putin's willingness to target neighboring states, including their children and
So this tells me the international cabal of billionaires always wanted the war with Russia. They started it before 2010 with Ukraine and Russia. They accelerated it in 2014 when they did a coup of the democratically elected president of Ukraine. And then they actually doubled the bombing of the Donbass, doing the one thing that would provoke Russia to invade the Donbass to protect the Russian-speaking natives, which is what they did. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, it wasn't to start a war, it was to end a war. But of course, again, it all goes down to framing. So the first casualty in war is the truth. And so this guy's up there doing what he's told to do, and what he's done his whole career is lie to his own country, his own citizens, about the threat. And so he's there to gin up support for a war that's going to enrich a handful of billionaires and slaughter a bunch of other people, and drain your and by the way, drain your tax base, your treasury, to gear up for it. That's what this is all about. Scare people so you will get more money into the pockets of the international security state, the war machine. That's what this is about. That's what he's doing. Do you see how even to this day they're still lying about the Ukraine war? Well, they have to.
civilian populations. The Russian leadership has made clear
It's all that's on their mind, war. Revelation 6 and 4. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Let's get one more. Because that's all these Edomites are. Wars in their heart. Let's see if I go to the right one. Lucky. Up. We can use this. Psalms 55 and 20. He hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. Now, Russia was trying to join NATO. They refused to. They refused to let Russia in. And then they start recruiting all countries near Russia so they can put them in NATO, so they can move their military missiles and weapons closer to Russia. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. You see, they keep trying to get the citizens of Europe hyped, right? They already said that the military, the UK's military ain't number 70,000 strong. So they're going to have to click up to try to go against Russia. But eventually, they're going to become allies with Russia. And everybody going to shoot their missiles where? Over here. To Babylon the Great. Guess what it is right here? We wasn't that close to the kingdom. These Edomites don't know what to do. They have lost their wisdom. Their house is divided. And they thinning out the herd. That's all the Lord doing. Thinning out the herd before he comes and send his son to take over. Shalom.